think in the past, people just weren't sufficiently conscious of the enormous impact of technology to change history. Like, I mean, the idea, for example, one of my pet themes is I'd really like to see the creation of a global state. Now, that idea is not just decades old or even a few centuries old. It goes back 2,000 years, goes back to the ancient Greeks. It's an old concept, but just not doable. It just wasn't practical because of the tyranny of distance, and social groups were isolated. They couldn't influence each other, and therefore had different ideologies and different beliefs and different religions, and they just didn't get on together. So constant wars. So it's really only now, and especially in the near future, that technological change is so rapid and so powerful that it'll have a major impact on politics. I see future history being driven. I see the engine room of future history being technology. Technology is changing at exponential pace. So I see correspondingly our future historical development also changing at exponential pace because it's pushed by technology, by the technological changes. So that I see is one possible answer to what was missed in the past. People just didn't appreciate just how powerful technologies can be or will be at changing the way they live, changing their beliefs, changing their politics, changing their form of government, and so on. Major factors influencing their daily lives. Difference between the Industrial Revolution and the Singularity. Well, the Industrial Revolution was sort of a mix of economics, technology, social change. Well, initially, it was a far greater productive capacity of machines. Once the steam engine was invented, and it would work ceaselessly, 24/7, with much greater power, and it allowed machines to be hugely more productive. Right? So the cottage industries then could not compete because their productivity levels were so much lower. So the prices of the machine-produced goods fell. So of course everybody bought the machine-produced goods rather than the cottage industry-produced goods. So that had a huge economic impact, right? And that in turn had a social impact because those people who were employed, self-employed, as cottage industry workers, they lost their jobs. They lost their livelihood. So how could they survive? What could they do? And the answer is that virtually all they could do was sell their labor power as employees. So they moved to the cities and became employees to the owners of the machines, the capitalists. So that had a huge social impact. Now, what about the singularity? What impact will it have? Well, it's sort of a different ball game because you're talking about not just changes to the way people work, but to their very natures. Right? If you go cyborgian, you're talking post-human. Right? It's a different order. It's a different kettle of fish. So either we live in a world populated not only by humans but by artilects and by cyborgs. So very, very different. Another major change is then the intelligence level of the population, whether it's human and post-human, will go up. Right? That'll be a major change. Whereas the general intelligence level during the Industrial Revolution was the same as before as after. Right? That did not change. But with the singularity, it'll go up. So, an analogy between the situation of the Luddites in the early Industrial Revolution and 21st century Terrans Is there a similarity there? Well, sure, in a sense. Both are resisting rapid technological change. The Luddites, they felt profoundly threatened by the machines because they saw the machines destroying their livelihoods. And, you don't have any money, you starve, right? There was no welfare state in those days, no unions, no worker parties. They didn't even have the vote, right? So they felt very threatened, and understandably so. So a lot of them just picked up their sledgehammers and smashed the machines. That was their short-sighted solution to their problem. Didn't work, of course. The machines kept coming and got smarter and more effective, and people just had to adapt. So fast forward now into 21st century, this century, and later decades, can you, in a sense, dismiss the Terrans in the same way as history dismissed the Luddites? Can that case be made? Well, possibly, if most of humanity chooses the cyborg or cosmist route. But here's the clincher. What if a sizable proportion of humanity goes, if you like, Luddite or Terran? What then? And what if not only is it a sizable proportion, but they are truly militant and angry and fearful? Then you have the makings of real conflict. And it's hard to predict the future. But I wouldn't be at all surprised that that's the way society goes. So if more, let's say a sizable proportion, let's say 30, 40, 50, 60% of humanity chooses to be, in 21st century terms, Luddite or Terran, to use the modern term, then that would be quite different from the Luddites of the past. For a start, I don't know of history to know the exact percentages of people who chose to be Luddites, but I assume it wasn't anything like 40, 50, 60%. Right? Whereas I wouldn't be at all surprised that a sizable hunk of society chooses to be Terran in the relatively near future, a decade or two from now, as the debate heats up. And this is what's so interesting that I hope with the social scientists can give us answers to these questions. Because at the moment we're still just hypothesizing and guessing. We don't really know just what percentage of people with informed opinions will choose to take the Terran viewpoint. We just don't know yet. And I expect within a few years we will know. And that will be interesting. And there'll be PhD theses and books written on these issues. How does society split on this major controversy of the 21st century? Should we build these artefacts or not? The dominating issue of our times. What sort of people? I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, but what kind of people were the Luddites? Well, they were probably middle class. They were self-employed. They had their own businesses. They were self-reliant. They sold their own products. So, I guess middle class. I mean, I'm guessing. So that's the historians could say. I'm not an expert in this field. And as for the future, the 21st century equivalent of the Luddites, the Terrans, if you take that viewpoint, right? What kinds of people would be Terrans? That's a really tough one. I suspect there will be a correlation between being more intellectual, more thinking, and being cosmist. Why do I think that? Because the more intellectual, smarter person is probably better informed of science, will have a better knowledge of the potential of what's out there, the knowledge of astronomy and the universe and computational capacities, and they'll have a better idea of what the intellect could become, right? And more likely to feel the awe, the AWE, as these intellects get smarter and smarter. Whereas your unthinking person, your rather mindless person, will be far less informed and more likely to react more at an emotional level, and then probably, this is just a guess, probably more likely to be Terran. So I suspect there will be a correlation between higher intelligence and cosmism. It's my guess.
Interesting.
Where would the middle class, the vast majority of people, which way would they go? Again, hard to predict. That sort of person will be influenced strongly by the media. The person who's reading the magazines and watching television and the movies and documentaries and so on. They will be influenced by the ideas in those media. I've given lots of talks to all kinds of audiences, and my impression is, judging by for example, in 2006, the BBC did a documentary on this issue. They called it Human Version 2. And on their website, they invited people to vote. And it was about 60-40. 60% in favour of Kurzweil's view, meaning that it'd be positive, that creating these technologies would be a positive thing for humanity, and 40% took my view that there might end up being a major war of the issue of species dominance. So, that was the general public. So we have early signs that it's going to be more or less 50-50, but it's still early days. So I'm hoping within a couple of years, the sociologists, the psychologists, the historians, the philosophers will get in on the act and start giving us informed, empirical answers. That will be really interesting to learn what the answers are. I'm looking forward to that. Well, for example, I had a girlfriend once. She was a vitalist. You go back to 1900s, more or less, especially in France. So a vitalist is somebody who thinks there's more to being human than just physics and chemistry. They think biology and life is more than just the physical aspects. They feel there's something, a soul or whatever. Now, to somebody who knows science well, that idea has been long refuted. Right? It's just not taken seriously by science anymore. But to somebody who doesn't know that, trying to predict how people like that would choose when it comes to the cosmos-Terran polarity, which way would they go, which way would they choose, that's tough. Maybe they'd be repelled by the cosmos notion. So it's hard to say. People surprise you. When you get out into the empirical world and you actually ask people, people behave in ways that you didn't expect. So I've learned from experience not to stick my neck out too much because I'm tired of having it hacked. So the empirical world is empirical. It's full of surprises. My short answer to the question, can machines be conscious? I just say, without any hesitation, yes. And why do we say that? Well, because we, as human beings, we get built, right? We are constructed when the female egg and the male sperm come together, that initiates a process where the DNA in that egg starts instructing the embryo how to build itself. It's a sort of self-constructive process, self-assembling, if you like. So that DNA you can look on it as a kind of computer code to how to construct a three-dimensional, living, breathing, thinking, heart beating, and so on, creature. So we're built. So The DNA is instructing how our molecules assemble to create more cells. So we go from one cell to about 100 trillion. Our human bodies, we have about 100 trillion cells, which is amazing. So babies grow, they get built, right? Just by assembling the molecules in the appropriate way. Therefore, it's possible, nature's found a way how to do it, it's possible to put the molecules together in such a way that you build a creature that's conscious and intelligent. Now, we are, in that sense, machines. We're molecular machines. But still, we're built. So, depending on your definition of machine, but for most people, I think they would accept the idea. Once they know enough biochemistry, molecular biology, and so on, we humans, all animals, we're molecular machines. We're a kind of living nanotechnology, if you like. Biochemistry and nanotechnology have close links. So, given that we're built and we're conscious, and if we're built, we're machines, and we are conscious, therefore, we, humans, we are conscious machines. Okay? Now, in time, I can imagine humanity, the science, will produce a kind of artificial embryogenesis. Right? Two of the major mysteries and challenges of 21st century science in biology are embryogenesis. How do you go from a fertilized one cell to build animals, bodies? How do you go from one cell to 100 trillion cells? Why do some cells specialize in becoming like heart cells and other cells become brain cells or skin cells or stomach cells? How does all that miracle, how does it happen? So, there's a huge amount of research going on at the moment trying to answer that question. How do you construct animals? The embryogenic process, how does that work? That's one major challenge. And the other big one, of course, is, in a sense, it's a subset of the first one, and that is, how does the brain work? Like, what is consciousness? Stuff like that. And those are two big biological questions. I suppose another one you could ask is the origin of life. How did life start? When the first reproductive molecules came into being, and then once that happened, you then got a kind of molecular Darwinism starting, because then these molecules started competing with each other. Right? And hence you got survival of the fittest molecules, the ones that could reproduce faster than the other ones. So if they reproduce faster, they took up the raw materials faster than the slower ones and forced them to starve. So you got Darwinism occurring at the level of molecules, and that's life in effect. So for that reason, I think it's only a question of time before science understands how our brains are constructed. The embryogenic process of building brains. We'll understand those principles, those ideas. We'll put them into our machines. We'll understand what consciousness is, what intelligence is. We'll put those ideas into our machines, and therefore we will build conscious, intelligent machines. That logic to me seems obvious. Right? We humans are conscious, intelligent machines. We'll understand the principles, put them into our machines, and therefore we build intelligent, conscious machines. QED.